All right. Hello. Oh boy, this has been quite a ride. So we initially uploaded this review on Monday, but I made a mistake. The video included some evidently top secret monsters that were not supposed to be revealed at the time. Now, while I am not personally ever precious about this stuff in pretty much any games I play, I get it. There are people who want the surprise, they care about the spoilers. I also discussed parts of the game that were not supposed to be discussed. They had particular content embargoed for a reason, and I totally understand. For all of that, my bad, legitimately, like apologies, 100%, I screwed up there. Simple as that. We deleted the video per Capcom's request, and yeah, that is what happened if anyone was curious, if you even knew that we've already uploaded a Monster Hunter review and then took it down. But that was Monday. As of today, I can show and talk about all the stuff that they wanted to remain secret, because the game is here. Monster Hunter Wilds is now live and playable. There are no longer any embargoes to keep within the guidelines of, so now I am free to show and talk about absolutely whatever I want. Also, you know what? On the bright side, I try to look there fairly often. This was a good opportunity to just flesh the video out a bit more, having a few extra days to work on it. As such, I've added some additional content, I've polished the edit up a bit, and I included a few more of my thoughts about the various things that I like and dislike now that I've had some more time to think about it. So with all of that out of the way, here we go. The Monster Hunter Wilds review they didn't want you to see. Let's do it. All right, Monster Hunter Wilds. Man, this game, it's fantastic. If I had to make an educated guess, I'd say this is very likely going to be a contender for my game of the year. Playing it over the course of this past week or so has been a total blast. It's just like everything I loved about Monster Hunter World, but more of it. It's bigger and all around better, on top of some nice quality of life improvements, a little bit of streamlining. Only a little bit though. It's still quite convoluted in a lot of aspects, but it's still great. Plus we get a few new features, mechanics, along with a handful of additional movesets for every single weapon. Yeah, this is great. Now, that said, if you have played Monster Hunter in the past and you didn't like it, Wilds isn't going to be changing anything about that. It's still the exact same basic formula. You pick a weapon, you prep your hunter, you go out and fight monsters for 5 to 20 minutes, collecting their parts, bringing them back to camp, making new armor and weapons, rinse and repeat. That, at its core, it is this game. It is every single one of these games. But if you do like that formula, as I do, this is more of that, but improved and in these much larger explorable play spaces. I love it. Maybe you will too. That said, it's not all roses. There are absolutely a few pain points in areas that I would love to see improve. For starters, while I've not experienced it as much of an issue myself, performance has been a glaring problem for many other reviewers, on top of the large swath of players who tried the pre-release demo and had less than ideal frame rates. Also, despite some streamlining and quality of life improvements that are there, much of the game is still fairly convoluted and does, I would say, a rather poor job of onboarding newcomers. Not so much of a huge issue for me personally, as I played a lot of World, but from the eyes of a new player, there is a lot to digest here, and the game just does a poor job of explaining its systems. Multiplayer, while this is improved, it is nowhere near as smooth and seamless of an experience as it should be. There are still 1, 2, dare I say 3 or more too many hoops you have to jump through to just get to play the game seamlessly with your friends. And lastly, as you might have heard rumblings around the internet about, it seems like the baseline difficulty has been smoothed down, maybe to a fault, presenting fairly little challenge or spikes of difficulty for players to overcome. I thought maybe I was getting better, but apparently no, that's not the case. The game has just been dumbed down for babies. Now, all that said, I still think this game as an entire package, the whole thing, I think it's fantastic. I absolutely recommend checking it out if you are at all interested in monster hunting games. It's just, yeah, there are definitely things that I would like to see improved going forward. But beyond that, what I really want to do here is just talk about what I really love about Wilds, because for the most part, I really love this game. No, it's not going to be changing your mind if you've never been into the monster hunting formula, be it in this franchise or elsewhere. But I will say, if you have never tried this game before and are even vaguely interested, Wilds definitely seems like the one to get into. But wait, before we move forward, get a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Spectre Divide. This is the new competitive 3v3 tactical shooter that features this rather unique duality mechanic where you control two bodies in real time. This allows you to do things like defend multiple sites simultaneously, cover your own blind spots, or even trade with yourself. Basically, this duality mechanic introduces a whole new vector for skill and mastery within tactical shooters. The game has you battling it out in round-based 3v3 competition with a core defusal game mode across 5 maps with 20 weapons to master, but also they've got a pretty major new update coming soon with Season 1 launching on February 25th. This comes alongside the Spectre 2.0 update with loads of changes. There's sprinting for faster rotates and combat freedom, reduced cosmetic prices, a ping system improvements, maps have been overhauled, snappier gunplay and equipment usage, fresh character customization options, performance optimizations, and upgraded anti-cheat. Then there's also the brand new map Canal located in the heart of Breakwater's Shadow District, and a new Battle Pass flashpoint with over 70 new cosmetics, including 15 free items from outfits, weapon skins, and accessories. If you'd like to learn more and check out Spectre Divide for yourself, you can play for free on PS5 and Xbox Series X and S right now. Use my link in the description below. Okay, so to kick things off here, what I want to do is start off with a very basic overview talking about like the core loop of Monster Hunter Wilds. So it goes something like this. You step out into the world, you track a monster down, you find the monster, fight the monster, kill it, collect its parts, and then you use those parts to craft weapons and gear. Now beyond that, there's a bunch of auxiliary things that are happening in the background for you to engage with. Consumables play a pretty big role. There's of course healing for when your health gets low, but also things that like help you withstand the elements, like keeping you warm in cold environments and vice versa. Or you get consumables that will help you counter various debuffs that you get, such as being poisoned or falling asleep. You've also got this incredibly useful tool called the Slinger. It's like this forearm mounted slingshot. There's a variety of different ammo types with effects that you can shoot out at monsters. There's a few different types of traps in the games, like Vine Trap and Shock Trap. You can physically carry these out and place them in the world, and there's also some passively found in the environment. And as the name implies, if a monster walks into the trap, it will temporarily lock them down. And then on top of that, every single monster that you fight, of which there are over 30 in the game, will be resistant and or susceptible to the game's various types of damage. So there are various types of weapon damage to be dealt, as well as different elements found in the game. Every single monster will either be resistant to them or susceptible to these various types, as well as having certain body parts to be targeted. And then depending on the weapon and elemental damage that you're using, you're going to want to target those different parts accordingly. Outside of the monsters themselves and the various consumables and traps, there's also the environment that plays a big role in this game. So as you move through the various locations, or maps as they are called, beyond traversing the terrain at the various levels and height variations, you're going to come across a lot of stuff. So you're going to see a bunch of different collectibles. These range from plants to herbs, ores, bones, and even small little creatures. You'll gather them up, and they, for the most part, will be used in crafting either weapons, armor, or consumables. And they can even now be gathered at a range with a brand new Slinger ability. You basically like throw out a rope and hook onto it and pull it back to you, which is really nice. The environment is also chock full of endemic life, all sorts of various creatures wandering around. You can kill and harvest these for crafting resources. There's some unused items found in the environment. These include things like healing bugs, vigor wasps, exploding balls, flash flies, paralyzing toads, poison mushrooms, the list goes on and on. You'll see like these loose rocky formations that you can pull down, or ice shards that can be broken off, or tree vines that can be pulled onto the ground, all of which will either damage and or inhibit monsters in some way. So while you're playing the game, you're basically going through this loop of hunting the big monsters, using the items and the traps to help in those fights, carving and collecting them after you kill them to take their parts for crafting, while moving through the environment and also doing things like gathering resources. And all of this while also going through the story campaign, which the basics of the story essentially are that a bunch of bad monsters have come into the local area, they're screwing up the environment, you gotta help the local people, and so you do just that. And all throughout the tens to hundreds of hours that you might be playing, it basically oscillates between doing the story missions and then free roaming and kind of doing your own thing. So you start out by making a character as well as your palico. There's a bunch of customization options here, lots to choose from. Then you go through the tutorial, which leads into your first real hunt of just a basic early game monster. There are quite a few cutscenes and dialogue encounters in here as you learn the story, speaking with various NPCs, progressing the narrative. And then eventually you reach this point where they're like, okay, so we've learned this new thing. Let's let's investigate it further by going over here, and that here will be like some area within the zone that you're currently playing in. And then they say, just let me know when you're ready. And then at that point, it's basically up to you. You can either take some additional time, go out hunting some of the monsters that you've already been introduced to, collecting more of their parts to either complete a gear set or make that new weapon upgrade. And then as soon as you feel you're ready, you go back and you talk to the NPC, and then they progress the story forward. And then that loop starts again. You do the story mission, some stuff happens, and you probably fight a new monster. You get some more dialogue, some more cutscenes. You reach this break point, and then you decide again, do you want to spend some more time farming or move straight into the next mission right away? It's totally up to you. That's how the campaign progresses up until you start to reach what would be effectively considered like the early version of endgame. You've moved through all the zones, you've gone through a bunch of narrative, and then eventually you reach what is basically a hard stop point where they ask you specifically to reach a certain hunter rank, which is essentially your character level, before you can continue the story. And that's going to mean going out and doing some higher level monster hunts and or doing a variety of the side quests that the NPCs and each of the game's town hubs, the base camps that they have for you. So you reach these breakpoints once you get to early end game, and they say, hey, you have to level up your hunter rank before the story continues. And so you go out on some hunts, you do some side quests, eventually you level up, and then you'll be notified the time has come, we can now continue the story. And that right there in a nutshell is Monster Hunter Wilds. Now, what about some of the new stuff that came into this latest iteration of Monster Hunter? Well, beyond that core game, here's some of the big standouts. So there's the new focus mode, and this is actually huge because it lets you redirect any attacks in the middle of an animation. Incredibly useful for any of the game's large number of different charge and or combo attacks. These will sometimes take like several seconds to work up to as you're going through a different chain or charging up an ability. The fact that you can now redirect and follow a moving monster in the middle of a fight, that is a massive quality of life improvement. And it's also like a clear time improvement because you're much more likely to not miss those huge attacks. We got this brand new mount, which is like the mix of a dinosaur and rooster of sorts. It's like a velociraptor bird thing. With it comes some mounted combat with both a basic and a dismount attack that you can do for every weapon. It will also auto run to whatever your target objective, location, or boss that you have pinned. And then while riding, you can do things like harvest resources from afar with that slinger, as we mentioned. You can also sharpen your weapon, heal yourself up, manage your inventory, etc. You can basically do everything you can do on foot while moving towards your target objective, which is really nice. The mount also comes with its own item storage for you to let you carry more stuff around, and it will hold a second weapon that you can swap to pretty much whenever you like while in the middle of the hunt. Although to be perfectly honest, I've not really bothered as I've just focused on the weapon and improving the weapon that I'm playing with, but I'm sure some more experienced hunters out there who are better at the game will make active use of weapon swapping. I can just foresee going from a melee weapon to having a ranged weapon backup, how useful that could be. I'm not really there yet. I'm just focused on bonking monsters on the head with my big old hammer. So that's all I'm doing. But yes, you can weapon swap if you choose to in the middle of a hunt. Oh, and as you go through the campaign, eventually you'll reach a point where you unlock some visual customization for your mount, letting you change things like the colors, feathers, the armor that they have, and then charms on them. This is all really just a cool additional customization. The SOS flare. So this was traditionally used in the series as basically an in-game means of opening up your hunt to matchmaking, which would then let other players join you in the middle of a fight. Now it actually automatically fills up your party with AI enemies that can then later on be replaced by real people once they join in. Even more so though, I think the real big benefit of this is it now lets people who are playing offline or prefer to play by themselves, they've got an option to actually have hunters help them in a fight without having to play with other real people or because they can just stay offline. You can now cook food anywhere while out on the go instead of having to go back to camp or town. This is great if you happen to forget or you run out of a food buff in the middle of a hunt. And then with this more open world that Wilds has, monsters as they're just kind of roaming about, you can actually start a hunt by just engaging with the monster, where previously if you wanted to go on a hunt that came with whatever bonus rewards the hunt might have had, you'd actually have to go back and start the quest specifically and then load into a new hunt to fight that monster. Again, really, really nice improvements. This is what I'm talking about, just like across the board, a ton of really great quality of life improvements. So as I mentioned, I am not going to exhaustively talk about every single specific system and mechanic in this game. That pretty much covers the gist of what Monster Hunter is and what has changed within Wilds. And now I just want to go into my pros and my cons. So as the baseline, like the foundation of what we're about to talk about here, I think this game is fantastic. Easily a contender for my game of the year. It's great. I'm going to be playing it for a long time, really enjoying it. Some of the highlights though about the things that I enjoy: tracking and fighting monsters and the whole process process is just so enjoyable. Really like it. As fun as ever, both from a gameplay perspective, but also the spectacle of it all. Like, these monsters are over the top with crazy abilities. Their introductions are a lot of fun. Honestly, most of what I enjoy about this series is the sense of improvement that comes through the process of hunting, and this happens on like a few different dimensions. So first, there is your weapon, learning all of the attacks, the various combos, the chains, the contextual abilities, and how all of this flows together. Every weapon in Monster Hunter is what I like to effectively call its very own class in comparative games. They all play very differently, and they all have unique mechanics or features that are not present on other weapons. This isn't like a Souls-like game or something where when we're talking about different weapons, we're just mostly talking about different swing patterns, ranges, and damage types. No, these weapons in Monster Hunter, they are fundamentally different on much deeper levels. In Worlds, I mainly used a greatsword. Here in Wilds, I decided to go with a two-handed mace. And man, a lot of fun swinging around this massive hammer, spinning in circles, building up charges to release these massive ultimate mega bonk ability. It's just great. And the more I've played, the more comfortable I've gotten with how everything pieces together, how every combo chain flows into other combo chains, the points at which you can move between these two different things, and then the defensive moves, the counter attacks, which will knock monsters over, all of it, to the point where right now, after concluding playing and putting this review together, I'm like fairly confident in how to manage this weapon, although certainly far from an expert. Then there's the monsters themselves, with every monster being different, like boss fights in most similar games. You have to learn their moves, the animations that play out before each of their attacks, and ultimately you just got to figure out how do you not get hit and when do you strike while the monsters are in recovery, or just when windows of opportunity open up. As you fight them the first, the second, the third time, you will just naturally pick these things up through experience, and then that coupled with your weapon knowledge, hunts become this dance between you and your target that's thoroughly enjoyable. And then there's a third layer of the various tools at your disposal that we've discussed, those being the traps, the different slinger ammos, environmental stuff like the rocks, the ice, and the trees, the various bugs and animals that can blind or poison or electrocute enemies, the bombs that you have, different grapple points that let you get up into the air and get onto the back of monsters. The list goes on and on. And with all of the above combined, the more you play, the better you get, and the more fluid the fights become. I am nowhere near like long-term expert players, but even through the course of this review, I've seen a marked and noticeable improvement to my hunts, and all of that is very satisfying. Also satisfying is the game's carrot on a stick, the progression system. It's pretty straightforward. You fight big monster, you take their parts, and then you make armor and weapons that look like that monster. These come in progressively higher tiers and rarities. As you move through the game, you will fight harder monster variations to create better gear, and then gear comes with stats. You've got like armor, different elemental resistances, as well as set bonuses. And then besides wearing gear sets that you think look appealing, you're going to pick and choose what you wear depending on your desired playstyle, the set bonuses, the resistances that they give, especially if you need to defend against any particularly tough fights. Something else I really like is the size of the game. Once more, it's basically just like Monster Hunter World, but more of it and bigger and better. And did I say bigger? Holy crap, this game is huge. It seems like they have at least doubled the size of each of the maps compared to what I saw in Worlds, with the total amount of explorable space that's on display here. Now that said, no, I don't know the exact square kilometer measurements of each of these maps, but it definitely feels significantly larger to me, and that's even taking into consideration that you are traveling much faster at a baseline with this mount. So there are 4 initial zones as you play the campaign, which they have already revealed prior to the game coming out. Those are the Windward Plains, the Scarlet Forest, the Oil Well Basin, and then the Ice Shard Cliffs. Each of these visually distinct areas, the names pretty much tell you exactly what you need to know about what sort of flora and fauna and environment you should expect in each of these areas. Now there is actually a 5th main zone as well that gets unlocked as you get closer to reaching endgame, but I'm not going to spoil that for you here. I will also add that there's a couple of like story specific areas as well as an arena equivalent solely for the purpose, like it has been in other Monster Hunter games, of fighting monsters in a small enclosed space. And honestly, I mean, this feels about as close to a Monster Hunter Online as we're likely to get from any game in the not too distant future, and I am all here for it. And I know this isn't an MMO by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just talking about like the big, huge explorable spaces, the variety of stuff in here, and there is some shared world stuff, at least in the base camps or the towns that are found in each of the zones. You're going to see other players running around, and it's all incredibly immersive as well. For one, thanks to the fact that you can now freely come and go between town and the map, the rest of the map itself, with no loading screen. It just makes the whole play space feel very immersive. They've also built in just like such a realistic feeling ecosystem with the variety of different animal life present and the fact that they interact with each other with these prey and predator relationships. Territory wars are back, where you will see two massive monsters going at it, and this can and does often happen while you're in the middle of a hunt. You're just gonna, like, you'll be hunting one monster and then you'll see another huge one swoop in and they'll fight for a while, and you can hack away while trying to avoid them rolling over each other and spitting fireballs and blowing stuff up, trying to do some damage to the target that you're going after. Or you could start attacking the one that came in out of nowhere, and then you basically get a subsequent simultaneously hunt taking place. But on your main target, you can flow straight into the next one after if you do some damage to them. So it's all really cool, very immersive and alive feeling space. Another big thing that also adds to the immersion that I've just adored is the game's use of seasons. So every single zone in the game goes through a cycle of seasonal changes. As the baseline, it's what is called fallow, and here the landscape will be more barren, there are going to be fewer creatures, and resources will be generally scarce. Then there is a transitional period where some sort of event happens. That'll be like the massive dust lightning storm that you saw in the beta, or there in the forest, there's like these huge torrential downpours that happen. Some big environmental event will take place, and this acts as a transition into the season of plenty, where there's going to be abundant plant and wildlife and things are thriving and new monsters roll in. In fact, yes, because beyond the visual changes between the seasons, you're going to see entirely different groups of monsters that aren't present in certain seasons but show up in others. You'll see things like pack density change. You'll see groups of endemic life all of a sudden have offspring that's going to be following them around. It's just like, again, they've built such a realistic and immersive ecosystem. It's unbelievable. The game is also really charming. There's just so much character here, especially with like the supporting NPCs, your Palico companions and all of their friends, as well as the various other factions of creatures and people that you meet along the way. There's also a lot of little touches that I find really appealing. So take something as simple as mining ore. You know, in most games, you hit a node a few times and then you collect the resources, the iron or whatever it is. But in Wilds, you actually strike the ore, which then breaks it into bits, and then you can see your character individually picking up those shards with their hands and putting them into their pack. It's a tiny detail, but that's the kind of thing that they do so well in this game. Some other examples, like when you harvest certain bugs in the environment, you actually grab the bug physically and you shake them a few times, depositing whatever their oils are into a tube, and then you put that tube in your belt and you release them to fly away. Or the cooking cutscenes. I mean, they're so good. There's really nothing else to say. Like, look at these things. They're unbelievable. And then finally in my list of pros are a bunch of these small but welcome quality of life changes we got, like the fact that traps and barrels can now be picked up after being deployed, and barrels can be thrown at targets, the ability to skip the 60-second timer at the end of a hunt, the fact that you've got 8 radial menus instead of the previous 4, buffs and debuffs will now have a 20-second timer when they are about to expire, and then weapon sharpening. This now ticks up throughout the course of the animation rather than happening entirely when the animation ends, so if you get interrupted or if you cancel it, at least you get some sharpening out of it. Lots of stuff in addition to all the other quality of life stuff that we mentioned prior. All right, so now I'd like to move on to the cons, and as much as I adore this game, there's a few things I want to note. For starters, let's talk about performance. So for me, not been an issue. I have not been impacted at all. In fact, the game's been running nearly perfectly in my entire many hours that I've sunk already. But prior to release, I have seen enough of a fuss online that there's clearly some percentage of players who have been experiencing poor performance with the preview build that we all had access to in the betas or tests or whatever they called them. And beyond all of those people who had issues in the early trial for the game, we have seen many reports of the review build from players who had performance problems as well. Digital Foundry, the folks who notoriously run thorough performance testing for any and all games they get their hands on, they did not receive a PC copy of the game from Capcom, only getting review codes to test for the console iterations. Not a great sign, and when it comes to Capcom, Capcom's level of confidence in their PC iteration. And for said console versions, the tests that they did run on both PlayStation and Xbox, the TLDR of that was that performance wasn't very good, and the game's visual quality was rather lacking to boot. That is a poor combination of things, less than a stellar assessment. And then if you look through any number of the major outlets out there who did get to play and test the PC versions, a lot of them also reported inconsistent, if not downright poor performance. Now, I will reiterate that my performance was totally fine. Like, I don't recall any major significant instances of frame rate dropping to a noticeable degree, but thus is the nature of PC gaming. Lots of different hardware configurations, there are many variables, and as such, a lot of different experiences. Mine was fine, but you may very well have poor performance, as other people seemingly have. A lot of the game is still very convoluted. There's just a lot going on, and it can be incredibly overwhelming. In particular, I can imagine for new players, the fact that I have a few hundred hours in World, and I found myself confused every so often throughout the course of playing the game. Yeah, there's just a lot of layers, and part of it is depth, but I think there could be it could be better presented to players, and there could be better onboarding to a lot of these systems, because especially with the vast quantity of consumables and ammo types and resources, it's just a lot to have to filter through if you're just starting the series for the first time. I would also say the UI and the user experience bothered me on several occasions. Namely, there's just a few too many steps and click-through menus and confirmations required on a regular basis while playing. I would say my biggest annoyance is while out hunting, pulling resources from a range with my slinger, I would be constantly having to do this 4-button press tango with my hunter because their pouch was full. So I would go to pick up an item, you know, some herb or ore or whatever in the environment. I'd go to pick it up, and then a menu screen would pop up, and I would get this notice, hey, your item pouch is full, please choose an item to swap out. And then I would either have to choose an item that I want to get rid of and to replace it with a new one, or if I don't want to swap it out, which for the most part I wouldn't because my item pouch was full with all of the items that I know that I want to carry around with me while on a hunt, I would then get a notice when I back out of that my item pouch is full, and do I want to now send it to my field pouch instead? And then I would have to hit another button to confirm. So the process is press a button to pull the resource, a menu pops up, I get a notice that I have to press a button to click through, and then I have to choose to swap out or back out if I don't want to swap out, which I didn't. That would then give me another notice, which I would then have to confirm via an additional button press. Like, holy crap, it's ridiculous. If my pouch is full, just automatically send the item to my field pouch. This is happening constantly while I'm out exploring or hunting. Anytime I try to pick up like 50% of the items in the environment, it's super annoying. Why is this so difficult? I don't understand. Multiplayer. Man, you know, it's better than it was in World, but it's still not great, especially when it comes to going through the main campaign missions, which, mind you, will be a good chunk of your, you know, first 10, 20, 30 hours of playing. You'll be going through doing these story campaign missions, and if you were hoping to do that with a friend, let me just tell you, it's still a hassle. It's not as bad as it used to be, but there's still, again, way too many steps. They should absolutely improve this. Let's not kid ourselves here. I know we love Glaze and Monster Hunter. I'm all about it. I think this series is great. I think this game is great, but why is this so difficult? I don't understand. Just let me invite a friend with one simple social menu option. Pull up the social menu, there's my friend, put him in my party, and then just let us play together. I don't need to be bouncing around. I don't need to be going through all these different menus, finding the lobby, and then linking up, and then having to go through an environmental link, and then having to make sure we're on the same quest progression. Like, we should be able to just be in a group and do whatever we want together. It's really that. I don't know why. Maybe there's some great defense, and I'm sure I'm going to hear it in the comments, but I don't know why the multiplayer is still, as much as it has improved, it's less annoying than it was in World. They've made some quality of life adjustments here, but not enough, in my opinion. Multiplayer should be, there's my friend, invite my friend, we play together. That's it. That's all. That's it. That's all we gotta do. That should be it, really, honestly. Now, I also wanted to briefly touch on the game's difficulty. During my playthrough for this review, frankly, I didn't much think about it, but looking back now, I would agree with all the people who are saying that the game appears to be on the easier side. In my mind, the overall lack of challenge, I simply chalked up to my increased hunting ability. I just thought I had gotten better, or maybe because I had swapped from playing the Greatsword in World to trying applying the hammer in Wilds. I don't know, dude. I just thought I got better at the game. But there are lots of Monster Hunter veterans and mega fans out there, people who reviewed the game, more familiar with the franchise than I am. They are saying compared to prior games, this one is on the far easier side, leading up and into the end game. So I guess I'm still bad. I don't know, but I wanted to bring up the difficulty discussion because a lot of people have been mentioning it. All right, and then the last con that I want to bring up isn't really a complaint about Wilds in a direct sense, but I will say that while playing this game, it kind of had me daydreaming about what could be if there was even more to the game beyond the monster hunting. That's it's the name of the game, it's the entire point of the game, and this genre, I get it. But I would love one day, Pipedream here, if we had a game with as much rich depth and interesting combat that we get in Monster Hunter, but that was also in a world that was a bit more fleshed out with activities and things to do. Again, imagine a Monster Hunter MMO where you've got all this great stuff that Monster Hunter has, but there's also a big seamless open world with points of interest. You go in, you do some stuff. You got dungeons and raids that you could group up with people, although grouping up, we just talked about how difficult that is. This isn't a con necessarily about Wilds. It just, playing this game just, again, had me dreaming of the day where we get Monster Hunter style combat and immersion and great complexity and depth and progression to the combat and the hunting element, but then also like an MMO, right? One day, maybe? No? Screw you, Dennis. No, never gonna happen. All right, so there you go. That is my review of Monster Hunter Wilds. The TLDR here is, I think this is a very, very, very good monster hunting game. Easily, again, a contender for my game of the year. I'm gonna probably be playing this more than I played World, and I played a lot of World. From the increase in size to the additional endgame monster variations, the just overall grandiosity of the whole, is that a word? How everything's big. All the quality of life improvements, the additional combat mechanics and weapon moves. It's just, this game is great. It's World, but better in my opinion. There's a lot to experience here, and as of this review, I still feel like I've only really gotten started. I do have some criticisms as we went over, but overall, easy recommendation from me. No questions asked. If you're even remotely interested or have ever enjoyed the monster hunting genre, this is about as good as it gets. Barring I don't know how, but maybe 50% of people have terrible performance. I didn't have terrible performance. It's the problem with PC gaming. It's not like the consoles where we're all on the same hardware, right? There's big variability, but my performance is fine. I hope everyone else's performance is good too. Fingers crossed. The game itself, really, really phenomenal. I really love it. That's it for today. Thank you for watching the review. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you all next time. Take it easy.